maybe not televised. All right, I'm going to start us promptly in just a couple seconds here. Okay, it is noon, so I'm going to get us started. First of all, thank you to all of you for taking the time to join us today for such an important topic. Water and water management are critically important in our community for so many reasons. Human health, recreation, economic development, ecosystem function, all of these and more depend on the ongoing access to clean water. So on behalf of the Clean Water Coalition, I would like to thank each of the candidates for coming here today to talk about these important issues and for sharing your views about how our community should address the challenges and opportunities related to water moving forward. Because water affects so many different aspects of our lives, it can be a very difficult topic to work on. Many agencies and organizations that work on water issues focus on one particular aspect of water. Many of the issues that plague our community, however, are especially complex, and they do not have easily identifiable sources or solutions. The JH Clean Water Coalition was formed to create a forum in which the various entities in our community who work on water could bring together the various expertises into a common space. And the Clean Water Coalition works together to understand the water challenges we face and to collaboratively design and implement solutions to those problems. The Clean Water Coalition partners include the Teton Conservation District, Protect Our Water JH, Trout Unlimited, Snake River Fund, Teton County Weed and Pest, the Jackson Hole Land Trust, PAWS, Ducks Unlimited, Wyoming Chapter of the Nature Conservancy, and the Flat Creek Water Improvement District. And part of the Clean Water Coalition's mission is to better inform the community about important water issues. This forum today is part of that effort. We believe deeply that the community needs to hear how elected officials plan to address water issues. And we would like to thank the Teton County Library for their partnership in putting on this forum and for creating the space for this community dialogue on the issue. We'd also like to thank Town of Jackson, the Teton County Public Health Board, and the Jackson Hole Conservation Alliance for their input and support on these issues as well in helping to put this forum on. Today's forum, just laying out nuts and bolts here, is going to last 1 hour. We have until 1 p.m. Each of the candidates has been given a white paper that was written by the Jackson Hole Clean Water Coalition partners and provides background information on a variety of important water issues for our community. The Clean Water Coalition partners have formulated questions about those issues. I'm going to pose those questions to each of the candidates, who will be given 2 minutes to respond to each question. If time allows, we'll allow for some dialogue on these issues. That said, we only have an hour, and we do want to make sure each candidate has an opportunity to respond uninterrupted to each question. I would like to point out, if it's not already obvious, that we have both candidates for mayor and town council participating in this forum. Michael Kudar and Haley Mortensen are our mayoral candidates, and the other participants are running for town council. If that's not obvious, hopefully it will be moving forward. So with that said, I would love to jump into the introductions. For the introductions, I'd like to give each candidate 1 minute. Please introduce yourself and briefly let us know your vision for stewarding our community's water resources. And we'll start with Michael Kudar.
Great. Thank you, Max. Appreciate this opportunity to address this issue that we have with water in our town. You know, 3 issues that we have is the water quality, settling fields, and, you know, transit encampments, especially down in Kearns Meadow. Those 3 things I think really need to be focused on as we move forward in this discussion. I think my opponent, you know, has had some single solutions, and I'm wanting to be more of a collaboration of bringing more experts to the table to figure out these issues and solve them. And we'll work together that way better, and we'll come to the table and figure out the best way to handle our wastewater, sewer water, and any other creeks that we have flowing through town Jackson. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Haley?
Thank you. Sorry, I had to do a quick location change. My name is Haley Morton Levinson, and I have been on the council for 8 years, and I really appreciate this forum and having the opportunity to highlight and speak to water in our community. I think it's easy for us to look at our clear creeks, look at our clear streams and clear lakes and not realize what could be lurking underneath. And that's something that's really important to me, to educate, to, give knowledge and to highlight this issue in our community. Some of the things that I think that we can look at are obviously one, making sure we have clean drinking water, making sure that the water when storm runoff goes into the creek, that's clean, and that we're really just being stewards of the environment around us. Thank you.
Thanks, Haley. For town council candidates, Devin, if you don't mind starting us off.
Thank you. I'm Devin Beeman, and I was raised here in Jackson. So we spent every weekend growing up out camping and on the rivers and fishing. My family's a fishing family. Like, we quickly realized when I went to campaign that my husband never takes a photo of me unless I'm holding a fish. Like, those are literally the only photos I have of myself. Throughout this campaign process, I had no idea how many water issues we have throughout the valley, and I've learned about them. They're all super complex issues that I don't claim to be an expert on any of them. Thank God we have experts to explain them to me, because there's a lot going on here, and I consider myself a pretty involved member of our community, but I was so unaware of a lot of these. So for me, education and getting more out to the public would be a top priority for me. And then also, it is hard to believe that we have all these water issues, like Haley said, because we look at our water and it's beautiful. But when you actually find out what these underlying issues are, you go, man, I don't want my kids floating Flat Creek or things like that. So, and our water is a big part of our enjoyment. We need it for our physical health and our mental health here in Jackson. So I'm thrilled to learn more about it and to make water issues one of my top priorities when I'm in office. Thanks.
Thanks, Devin. Jim.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jim Rooks. Thanks so much to Protect Our Waters and the other 9 organizations. This is an incredible collaboration of government, NGO, nonprofit organizations to make today's forum possible, to create the white paper, and to do the amazing work they're doing. I'm going to start by showing off. I'm a teacher, so I always have to use visual aids, right? So I'm super proud of my my trout-friendly lawn placard here, and yeah, water means everything. We are water, and water is us. I think there's nothing we talk about that doesn't one way or another come back into this quintessential resource. If we talk about wildlife, we talk about transportation, we talk about housing, we talk about zoning, comprehensive planning, development, everything glues back to water. So I'm really psyched to be here today. I also think there's so much good news on this one. The bad news, I learned about it through my in-laws, my mother and father-in-law, who come out and stay with us at times. They're from Baltimore, Maryland, which is not the cleanest city in the world. And they put water filtration systems in our house. And I'm like, hey, we don't really need that around here. This is like 6-7 years ago. And they said, no, you have arsenic and E. coli in your water. And I said, well, no, you must have read the wrong report. This is not Baltimore. And they're so intelligent and smart and earth-loving people, and they helped to educate me back in the day about the realities of what we're facing, and then we've seen it manifest. That said, when you hosted a previous workshop that was very educational, I learned so much, and I'm like really optimistic about so much good work that's happening with regards to water. I'm happy to be a part of it.
Thanks, Jim. Pete?
Thanks, Max, and thanks to the Clean Water Coalition for bringing this issue to the forefront. I think it's really helped the public to understand it and pay attention to it. I'm Pete Muldoon, currently the mayor. I'm running for Jackson Town Council, and I'm not an expert on water stewardship. I don't think any of us are, and I think that's okay. So rather than embarrassing myself and talking about the technical solutions to water stewardship, I think I'll just talk about my values and how they impact the decisions that I make on the council. I believe that access to clean water is a universal right. You can look at the tragedy of Flint, Michigan. You can look at how important this was to the people at Standing Rock. And then you realize that we can't just leave this up to the market to take care of this based on whether somebody can afford it or not. So it's a universal right. We need to make sure that every citizen has access to clean drinking water. That should be the first priority. Now, if that access is threatened, we've got to act, and it's clear. And I think due to a lot of the work that the Clean Water Coalition has done, that it is now threatened. And so we need to make sure as well that our rivers and our streams are kept free from pollution and continue to function as habitats for the many types of wildlife that use them. But fundamentally, for me, it's an issue of access to clean water for every person in our community. I also believe in the science. I believe in science, and I believe in listening to the experts. And so I will do as I have done throughout my tenure on the town council or as mayor, and follow the advice of the experts as they all help us to realize that vision.
Thanks, Pete. Jessica.
Thanks everyone for putting this together. It's always nice to have an opportunity to share our thoughts and positions. In 2010, I participated in the United Nations World Water Summit, where all of these water issues were discussed from a global perspective. And I think that a lot of times Jackson Hole, we like to think that we're exceptional in all of these ways. And we have some awakenings when it comes to, housing, for instance. That's an issue we share with the rest of the world. And then water, access to clean water, what we do. I mean, we don't really have much upstream. We have ourselves to look at as far as our water sources, but what we do here affects downstream and the people that are receiving what we allow to leave our area. And I think that turns into an equity question, because water is life. It's foundational for everything, our entire ecosystem, which includes us. But it really connects all of us in these essential ways. And so I think when I look at it from an equity and responsibility place, it seems like it's a no-brainer, and it's the most responsible thing that we can do from just ownership and making sure that everybody has access to this right. And as far as what I would focus on from a policy perspective, I think, like Pete said, I'm not an expert, but I do listen to experts. And obviously we have some stormwater runoff issues and then water quality issues. Actually this summer, my son, we got him these little kayaks, the hard plastic kayaks. And what he liked to do every single day every day, he likes to go up to Dairy Queen and he likes to float as far as I will absolutely let him, obviously with me. And we did it out in Fish Creek as well. And then a couple days later, he ended up getting these staph infections on his legs. And I didn't know, was that caused by the water quality in Fish Creek or Flat Creek? I don't really know. But that's sad and alarming that we don't know what is going on in our local waterways.
Thanks, Jessica. Thanks for the introductions, everyone. I'm going to jump us into questions now, and there's some substantive questions. Just for the audience sake, we have emailed these questions in advance, not a ton of lead up, but about 24 hours preparation, so the candidates have had a chance to look at these and consider their answers. I'll hold everyone to 2-minute responses on this. I'll try to privately chat you when you're bumping up on that, just so you know. And but we'll jump into the questions now. And the first one relates to stormwater, which a number of you brought up in the introductions. So through the town of Jackson, Flat Creek is currently listed as an impaired waterway by the EPA due to suspended sediment and habitat alteration. Stormwater runoff from the town of Jackson contributes to this problem and carries a number of other pollutants into the waterway. The town of Jackson is currently looking at updating its stormwater master plan to reduce stormwater runoff contamination of Flat Creek, but these improvements are going to come with new costs. The question is, how should the town of Jackson fund stormwater infrastructure? What sorts of funding streams or incentives for green infrastructure should be created? And Jessica, you'll get the first crack at this one.
Thanks. I think it always comes back to funding, which I think over the next few years, we're going to have some significant struggles finding revenue sources that we don't need to use for other extremely pressing issues like recovering and maintaining services and helping people get through COVID. But as far as stormwater runoff, the idea that I really like is creating a stormwater runoff district similar to what we have with water or sewer, and allowing people to pay fees that would then be used for the purpose of improving or supplementing or maintaining these systems so that we can effectively address our stormwater runoff problems.
Thanks, Jessica. Devin.
More money. We need more money, right? Always. I always do. When I met with Larry, the town manager, and I said, please explain what the town's doing right now to work on the water issues and stuff, things like that. He explained to me, I have tons of notes actually from my meeting with Larry because there's so much going on that I can't remember it all. So he explained to me that their town is in the process of making this new stormwater master plan, which should be ready, the way I understand it, as early as next year. And that the town staff will then bring this report to the elected officials that are in office then, and then policies will be made based on what that report says. So I'd be very excited to have a seat at the table in making those policies, determining the cost involved with each of them, and finding a good balance of how we can improve those things and still squeeze them into our budget somehow. So absolutely, I support that. It does need more money, and I'm excited to see what those policies will look like. Thanks.
Thanks, Devin. Jim.
Yeah, so I think when we look at funding streams, we have the 7th penny tax in front of the voters coming up in November. We talked a lot about that last night. And I think, the research would indicate that it's kind of a coin flip right now. Some of the data they're showing is that, 54% of people didn't support it, so on and so forth. And one of the things we're hearing is a concern about undefined allocation of those funds. I'm prepared to specifically say 1/3 of those funds, to the tune of approximately $5 million, should go directly into water. Because it's so vital. It's a human right, as Mr. Muldoon rightly said. And I don't think that anything else is more important. And I think if we really specify and say we're going to use some of these 7th penny tax funds for comprehensive water treatment, I think more people will vote for it, because I think everyone's just naturally invested in the importance of water. Obviously, SPET funding, but philanthropy. The town has a rich history of philanthropy. I think that's something we can really tap into as far as asking people to donate. And then finally, just the funds of each individual citizen. The Trout Friendly Lawn Initiative is a good example, is that it prompts and incentivizes us to be doing the right things in our individual properties, and thus mitigating some of the larger macro water challenges. But yeah, I think at least 1/3 of the 7th penny tax should be allocated directly for water.
Thanks, Jim. Pete.
Thanks, Max. I think, one of the questions we have to answer is whether we want to try to fund stormwater improvements in a targeted way by having new development pay for some of it, or by forming a stormwater improvement district, as Jessica mentioned, or whether we should pay it out of 5th cent that funds capital improvement projects. So I tend to think it's probably going to be a combination of the two. I also know that stormwater improvements are expensive, and the town of Jackson's got a very long list of important capital improvement projects that include other important community goals, and we don't have sufficient funding to accomplish all of them. So I think the best thing we can do now is to support the 7th penny of general revenue. It's going to make a huge difference in us being able to move forward with these projects in a timely manner, and in allowing elected officials the flexibility to put together an efficient timeline and get these things done. And it sounds like the council candidates are all on board with that. So I think that should give some help the public have some confidence in knowing that we will that we're willing to spend that money on things like this that are we know are important to the community. I think in the long run, the ability to create a stormwater improvement district to assess an improvement fee is interesting and something we ought to consider pursuing. 51% of the voters within the district would have to approve the measure. But that's a longer term project, and the voters would have to make that decision, and we're not going to get that done on the timeline that water quality requires. So in order to get to work on this now, we've got to get the 7th cent passed.
Thanks, Pete. We'll now move to the mayoral candidates, and we'll start with Haley.
Thanks, Max. I think that it's important to look at how we fund it right now. And we do that with SPET dollars and the fifth cent. For example, Gregory Lane improvement was passed on the most recent SPET, which I'm very grateful for our community voting in favor of that. That's a $10 million project, $5 million of which is going to stormwater improvement. Other projects that we're working on right now is restoring the Cache Creek tube. And for those of you that don't know, Cache Creek runs under town in a tube. And in the last few years, we've spent $3 million on updating that. And those are both of those projects are just examples of ways that we're working on it now and talking about how much these things actually cost. Annual costs, just looking at stormwater runoff in our catch basins and in our treatment units, is about a $200,000 annual cost that we can't use SPET money for. So we do need to look to other fund options, or it'll be, you know, other things that are very important to our community and needed. It's a trade-off. And, you know, right now, I've been working with the Wyoming Association of Municipalities on a state level to have legislation passed making stormwater an enterprise fund. And that would be, if a community so chooses, it would be similar to water and sewer. And I think that I'm hopeful that that will pass relatively soon, especially since most of the municipalities are on board, and that could be a really good option. That's not this year or probably in the next fiscal year. So we really have to consider that. And I would agree that that would be where the general penny could, those funds could be used. Thanks.
Thanks, Haley. Michael?
Thanks, Max. Yeah, stormwater obviously needs to drain, and the regulations that we have in place are not good. They're actually poor at best. I think the question was about solutions, and you know, the solution now obviously is when people develop, whether it's a home or business or any kind of building, you know, we need to increase those fees, obviously. But we also need to think about, well, why don't we incentivize these developers and say, hey, let's come up with some green storm water infrastructures. So when that water hits the roof, goes straight into the gutter and right back into the ground. That is the solution. And that is how, those are the options I will bring as your mayor to solve these problems. And I'm not going to tax these people anymore. I really feel that everyone wants to tax everyone. And no, that is not a solution, guys. These people are already taxed enough, and they're already stressed out enough, and trying to get more money out of them to throw at things. We've got to get outside our box, and we've got to think more better. And we have to have these storm drains installed. And like Haley mentioned, the project that's going on right now on Broadway that's being done on these huge vaults. But again, with these vaults, guess what comes? Maintenance. And it's roughly about 100,000 plus a year to maintain these things. These huge vac trucks have to come and suck all of that garbage and crap out. And we got to look at where our issues are with the storm drain. We got the rodeo grounds where we stock all our snow in the winter. And guess what? That stinks. And if you go over there in the winter, it smells just like motor oil. So we have a huge issue there. So those are the things we've got to get outside and address them and fix them. And as your mayor, I will do that. I will come with a comprehensive solutions that our town needs and needs now. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. I will just acknowledge we had a good audience question as a follow-up on stormwater. I'll come back to it if we have time. The second question, though, is related to wastewater, which is another very important topic. And the town of Jackson currently operates the largest wastewater treatment facility in Teton County. This facility not only serves town residents, but also many developments within the county. It plays a critical role in reducing wastewater loads into our local aquifer. As residential development proceeds in both the town and county, questions have been asked about the capacity of that facility and what the role the town of Jackson should play moving forward, allowing county developments to utilize the facility. So a question for all of you is, what should the town be responsible for, and what role should the town play in sanitary waste conveyance and treatment? If you think the town should assume responsibility for a larger service area, how should this be prioritized and funded? And Michael, we'll start with you.
Back. Awesome. Yeah, obviously, again, this is an issue. This is a problem. And it comes back to comprehensive solutions. And I don't have the answer to that right now. But obviously, we have to address it, and we have to do it sooner than later. And I'm sorry, we cannot tax our way out of this. You're going to hear this all day from me, all week long, all month long until November 3rd. And again, the water quality, we just have to think better. I've toured down there at the wastewater treatment plant with Johnny Z. They're doing a great job. They're always testing and trying different things to make it more efficient and better. They're always trying to make it that it's transparent to the public of what's going on down there. And I think they've done a great job. Can they do better? Yes, and they want to do better. So again, let's bring the experts to the table and let's figure it out that way.
Thanks, Michael. Haley?
Thank you. So right now, the town of Jackson operates the largest wastewater treatment plant in the valley. I think that is obvious. And we connect areas as far south as Hog Island with the school, YDOT, Weed and Pest, all the way up to the airport. And we do that as the town. And right now we're undergoing a capacity study, which is really crucial to where we're at now, but also where we're looking for the future. With the town zoning that we've recently undergone, this capacity study will be able to look to that and to the future to see where we're at now and where we can go. I think that looking at wastewater districts such as Teton Village and the Aspens are really important as well. And it'll take the whole community working together. There's about 600 to 700 septic tanks just on the West Bank and down through Hoback. And maybe the town can handle that. Maybe it's something bigger of looking to where we all work together and find the best environmental solutions. And I look forward to working on it.
Thanks, Haley. Now we'll move over to the town council candidates on the same question. And Pete, we'll start with you.
Great. Thanks, Max. I think, Haley said it pretty well. The town of Jackson's treatment plant, it's owned, it's operated, it's been maintained, it's been paid for by the taxpayers of Jackson over many years. So meeting the town's priorities or needs should be our first priority as council members. That means we've got to find out, first and foremost, how much capacity the town's actually going to need at build out. I expect that we will find that we have excess capacity at build out. And so then we have to start assigning that excess capacity to the highest priority that we're facing today. So, if we were to prioritize clean water, that means probably connecting the oldest and most contaminating septic systems first. And that's going to be difficult to do from a technical standpoint, but it's probably the most effective way to reduce groundwater contamination. So that's an analysis I'd probably leave to the experts. But generally speaking, new development ought to pay for that excess capacity if it's not inside the town of Jackson, because that treatment plant is owned by the taxpayers of Jackson. But we also need to recognize that some new development comes with other community benefits, such as housing. And when it does, and those benefits are real, we should recognize and account for that. It's also possible that some new development would be annexed into the town of Jackson, and that changes the calculus as well. But fundamentally, we should be trying to treat all of the wastewater in the county that we possibly can within the town of Jackson's wastewater treatment plant, as long as we make sure that we are prioritizing the folks who have paid for that system over the years.
Thanks, Pete. Jessica.
So I have to I think this is going to be so redundant because everything that Haley said, everything that Pete has reiterated, I don't know how much more we can build upon that. We need to have the results from this capacity study to understand where and how we can add to what we can do with our wastewater treatment facility. There are options. I mean, I think as much as we can do, we should do, just because it's beneficial for water quality overall. And like we've said numerous times, water connects all of us. And so it should be a joint venture to make sure that we are working all together to make sure that that we do have high quality water. With, I think, Wilson's business district tapping into ours, there is some discussion about maybe looping in from the Aspens all the way out with all those septic tanks, tying them into a sewer system that then goes into our plant. But once again, it's all a matter of capacity. And as far as development goes, we, with the zoning and the density that we want to have in town, we need to prioritize what the town needs before we can start building out. And once again, it goes back to this capacity study. But yeah, the town has to be prioritized. The density has to be prioritized. If we're going to keep our workforce local, that is of essence. And so we need to focus on that. And maybe if we do have people tie in, we can upcharge them a little. I don't know exactly how that works or how legitimate that would be, but we shouldn't have to assume the cost for treating other people's waste, even though we are all connected, but it has to be paid for. And as we've all discussed, we don't have additional revenue. And even when we do, there are going to be other things that we need to take care of.
Thanks, Jessica. Devin.
Yeah, so this is one of those things that when I hear about new developments around the valley, people are like, just tie it into town. It can go into town wastewater. And I'm like, well, I don't know that it actually really can. So this capacity study is going to be huge to find out, you know, how much town can handle, like the other candidates have said. But this is one of those big issues for me that I truly believe is a town and a county issue when we look at it, and something that we're all going to have to work on together. And I know that the county is going through a county-wide comprehensive wastewater planning strategy. Something, it's a big word that I can't remember off the top of my head right now. But they are going through that because water quality isn't really addressed in a meaningful way in our comp plan. And this is getting a little bit onto the county side, but I truly believe that more responsibility lies on the county side and they need to step it up a little bit. And in 1994, I think it was, when the comp plan got revised, water quality used to be one of the highest issues in the comp plan, and then it kind of disappeared. So they're working to bring it back into the comp plan and make it a priority and find ways for things like these old failing septic tanks on the West Bank. Yeah, it's pretty much the septic tanks. They're the biggest problem out there, but they've got to figure out a wastewater management plan too. So I don't think it should lie all on the town. I think it should be a county-wide issue that we all work on together. And I won't be redundant and repeat all the other things that everybody else has said, and what's fabulous about this one is it sounds like we all agree on water. So it's very nice to be at a forum where we're also agreeable with each other.
Thanks, Devin. Jim, you get the final crack at this one.
Well, it's a great question. So as mentioned, it's the town and the town taxpayers that have built that awesome facility south of town. UV treatment, chemical treatments, the series of sediment ponds, using the earth to kind of cleanse the water before it goes into the Snake River watershed. So what the town's responsible is the jurisdiction of town first. And but as everyone said, this is all of our issues. Looking how should it be prioritized? It should be at the top of the comprehensive plan. There's a great work going on right now with our elected officials in our community to revision that comprehensive plan. And it's perfect timing to put water right there at the top of it, as well as regulations with regards to saying, if you do have a septic system, as we learned with Dan Helig and the Wyoming Outdoor Council, is those need to be tested periodically. They need to be measured and monitored, and sometimes improved by the property owners themselves. I would like to see more micro wastewater treatment facilities throughout the valley, including on the West Bank. And so we could see with the Gill proposal, for me, one of the requirements is to ensure that any larger developments like that institute their own wastewater treatment facilities kind of on site or adjacent to those developments. I could see those spaced strategically and safely across the valley. The problem with tying in the West Bank, as Johnny Z told me, and anyone who's worked with, apparently we're all taking tons of notes. You spend an hour with Johnny Z, you're gonna learn a lot. And is that it's piped across the Snake River. So, and that pipe has broken one time previously, you know, so the idea that all of that material should just be put into a pipe and piped across a major watershed might not be the best answer. I'm not saying that's not part of it, but I'd like to see some of those microsystems out on the West Bank. I'd like to see incentives for people who have waste septic systems to get that testing done, to honor the results of the testing, and then to help get rid of the old ones and tie those into the systems. But it's town and county. We're all in this together. I think that's why we have such a uniform agreement on this, is that it's hard to think that it's somebody else's issue. This is our issue, and we have to work together between the town and county to make it right.
Thanks, Jim. We're going to shift topics here and talk about Kearns Meadow. And Kearns Meadow has come up a couple times already. It's a unique resource within the town of Jackson. It is a property that is owned by the town of Jackson, managed by Teton County Parks and Rec, and protected by a conservation easement with the Jackson Hole Land Trust. Kearns Meadow provides, among many other things, intact riparian habitat, which I will just point out is extremely unique for a town to have intact riparian habitat with a functioning floodplain in the middle of town. Recreational opportunities for the community also exist there, and there's significant wildlife habitat benefits to it. Question is, how should Kearns Meadow be managed? How should the conservation values of Flat Creek and the surrounding areas and the recreational goals of the property be balanced out? And Jim, we'll start with you on this one.
So I live right up here on Flat Creek Drive. Kearns Meadow is sacred ground to me. My brother and I were lucky. You know, my mom would drop us off at A&W before it was Dairy Queen, and we'd fish through town, and everyone else had to stop at Safeway, you know, Staples is now. But we knew old man Pete Kearns, and we had permission to continue fishing on. Caught my first fish on a fly rod. Ruined my life. I've wasted a lot of time fishing ever since then, but it's special to me. And how we should manage the ecosystem there is by putting it above all other things. It's such a unique zone, as you mentioned, Max, with just such a rich ecosystem, and the Kearns family and their philanthropy and making sure that that was protected needs to be honored. I appreciate the town council on Monday night not necessarily building a pathway, which was going to be kind of a pathway to nowhere until the Virginian properties developed. And so I think less is more on Kearns Meadow. I could see some ADA handicapped accessible raised boardwalk in there and stuff like that to open up that area for folks in town. But I don't think it should be a dog park. I don't think I don't want to see a bunch of paved pathways going through there. I kind of like it just the way it is. And that's one of the areas that each of us are all volunteering to clean up our town, I think next week. And that's the zone I volunteered for. I'm going to put my waders on, get a bunch of my students and friends, and we're going to walk down there, because as I go down there and fish with my kids, there's a lot of garbage that's left in Kearns Meadow from the recreators. And yeah, I just think it's a treasure of our valley, and we need to take good care of it. And I love the 3-tier sediment collection pond on the east side of that Kearns Meadow. It's a genius system that's working very well. Yeah, let's protect Kearns Meadow.
Thanks, Jim. We will go to Pete next.
Thanks, Max. you know, the value of these open spaces in town and of our town park.
Uh-oh, Pete, we may have lost you. Pete, while you're getting back on, why don't we skip ahead and we'll go to Jessica, if you don't mind stepping in.
Not at all. So I actually live in Pete Kearns' old house, right up against the meadow. And just this morning, there was a moose in the backyard. We have a little area behind me where a family of deer, actually probably multiple families of deer, live. They actually come out and bluff charge the dogs that live 2 doors down, which is always entertaining and annoying when the dogs start barking. But I am acutely aware of the value of Kearns Meadow. And in some regards, so I live in Pete Kearns' house. Whenever the deal was made with the land trust in the town, Pete Kearns had some ideas about what he wanted to see in the meadow. And there's been contention about this to honor what Pete Kearns wished for, or to maintain the protection of this wildlife habitat. Because I think too, some people confuse Kearns Meadow with maybe a migration corridor, which it's absolutely not. It is wildlife habitat, and it needs to be protected as such because it is the one space that we have in this town that is decent as far as size goes, that does provide habitat to animals. So for me, that's the most important piece, because I see it every single day with my own eyes, the foxes, the birds, like I said, the moose, the deer. And that is where they live. So as far as who should take care of it, I think the biggest thing right now is we're waiting for the environmental assessment to come back to let us know what the impacts of anything we do will be there, and what we can do as far as honoring what Pete Kearns wanted. But at the end of the day, I think we know far more now about Kearns Meadow and the wildlife and the habitat that it provides than we did whenever the deal was arranged with Pete Kearns. So I think we have to consider that things change over time and try to do our best to make sure everyone gets enough, but the wildlife win out at the end of the day.
Thanks, Jessica. Devin.
It is such a critical piece of land in town for the wildlife. It's also important for our community members to use. When I learned that Flat Creek is an impaired waterway, to me that word means it's sick, it's not healthy, it needs maybe a break from recreational use. All the garbage down in there that Jim's talking about, maybe it needs a break for a little while. Maybe we see what this new assessment says and we make a plan on how to help it get healthy again, Flat Creek and the area, because it is important for wildlife to have that spot in town as a little bit of a refuge. We think about that we're surrounded by forests and national forests, but that little spot in town is also pretty critical. So I think it's a balance, but my personal opinion, that is not an expert opinion by any means, is that it might need a break for a little while. Not forever, but for some time, so it can get healthy again. Thanks.
Thanks, Devin. We'll hop down to the mayoral candidates, and hopefully Pete's able to hop back on here. Haley, do you want to take a crack at this one?
Yes, thank you. Kearns Meadow is near and dear to my heart, as it is to everyone's, as they've said. And this was actually one of the top on my priority list when we go through our annual priorities. And, we have worked on the environmental impact study. And let me back up a moment. I think it's important for folks to know that some of the things when the town took over this property or gained ownership from Pete Kearns, which I'm very grateful for that, there are things allowed or contemplated, such as parking garage, some, kind of more heavy use than I think a lot of us think of. And that's important to me to highlight, because I agree that we've had some different ideas and we do realize a lot more about it being wildlife habitat. I also think that by managing or spotlighting it a little bit more, we can clean up the waterways. We can have more eyes on the area. And I think of places like our park and translating some of those values and goals to Kearns Meadow. And then that gets into accessibility for me. There are a lot of community members who live in town who don't have access to even to our national parks or to our park. They don't have cars, or they don't have the time to take half a day or a day. And I could really see, and I do see Kearns Meadow as being that for our town. And it, as with anything, it's a balance, and recognizing that is really important. But I really would like us to make it kind of more of the jewel of town than leaving it as it is right now. And that is still on my priority list, not to bring COVID into the mix, but COVID really set us back about 6 months right now with bandwidth. And as we've all mentioned, it's another story with funding. And so, you know, it's things like this that we see some of our progress not moving as quickly because of the current pandemic that we're in.
Thanks, Haley. Michael?
Yeah, thanks again, Max. This is a gem. It's right in the center of our town. Jimbo said it, you know, the issue of water circles right back to everything. And I too used to get inner tubes at Joe Tomich's old shop, and we would float all the way. And I too had permission from Pete Carnes to go through there, and that brings back some memories there, Rooks. But you know, how could any politician ever possibly talk about the needs of housing and transportation, building, wildlife mitigation before we address the valleys and capacity of growth, right? Water and natural resources and beauty of this valley has a limit, and we need to define that limit, and we need to define it with Kearns Meadow. So when we look at it and we think about it, you know, what is the best solution for there? Well, let's get everyone to the table, town and county, let's collaborate, and let's figure out what is the best. I don't know the answer to it. Again, these are solutions. These are answer, you know, we need the answers from experts, and we really need to study this and make the right decision. And it's not take our time, it's address it now, do it now, and protect that Kearns Meadow and protect Pete's Kearns legacy. Thanks.
Thanks, Michael. Pete, I think you've been able to join us by phone. Do you want to, if you have connection, you want to address the Kearns Meadow question?
Sure. I'm not sure where I got cut off there, but yeah, I mean,
right at the beginning.
Fundamentally, I think it right at the beginning. Perfect. Well, you know, this is I think as I was saying, the value of the open spaces that we have left in the town of Jackson and our town parks in general is going to increase along with the increasing density in town. So we're going to have some really difficult decisions. We're going to have to balance the need to conserve a really amazing and important part of our ecosystem right in the heart of Jackson with the increasing need to interact with it. So I think, you know, this is obviously a process that's going to have a lot of stakeholders. It's going to take elected officials with good, thoughtful decision-making processes and good judgment to find that balance. And, you know, finding that balance is the political part of it. That's our job. But it also requires expert analysis of the costs and benefits associated with the various decisions that you could make along that spectrum. So, you know, I'm comfortable with letting that process play out and focusing on the values and the priorities that are involved rather than rushing to a judgment on what we ought to do here. But I should acknowledge, I'm sure that everybody else who's gone has acknowledged the importance of getting this right and the importance of really taking our time and thinking it through, not being ideological about it, but just making a good decision here.
Thanks, Pete. I will mention again, we're getting good audience questions, and I apologize. We're probably not going to have time, given our limited timeline here, to address them. But we'll see how quick the answers are in this last question, which I want to make sure we do get to, which is land development regulations along Flat Creek. And Flat Creek is primarily surrounded by private lands as it flows through the town of Jackson. Many of the properties directly adjacent to the creek were developed decades ago and do not necessarily conform with current land development regulations. Minimal riparian buffers and snow storage directly adjacent to the creek are fairly common. Redevelopment of these properties could benefit the health of Flat Creek, but it rarely happens since it almost always requires landowners to reduce their building footprint to conform with current regulations. So the question is, do you support creating a special set of land development regulations for Flat Creek adjacent properties that would incentivize landowners via tools like density bonuses to redevelop those properties in a way that creates setbacks from the creek, increases riparian buffers, and or improves public access? And Devin, will hear from you first.
Absolutely. I support things like that. We get really focused on, mechanical solutions to things, but there are a lot of natural solutions that can be done. Like you mentioned, the setbacks, planting more shrubs. There's just a lot of natural solutions, I guess is what I'm trying to get at here and spit it out quickly so we get to public questions. But yeah, I absolutely support those kind of things. It benefits the water, it benefits our community, and I look forward to making those new policies. Thanks.
Thanks, Devin. Jim, we'll hear from you next.
Yeah, I support all of that. I think that I think we need to be more strict about where people build in direct proximity to not only Flat Creek, but Cache Creek. Let's not forget our other town creek. I'd like to see Cache Creek maintained as an open water source as much as possible. I know it's not going to flow from its source into a Flat Creek. But the same thing with Flat Creek. It's going to help with flooding, which is already a major issue on the lower end of Flat Creek. We have stewards like Haley and her family that are right on the creek there, who protect as much as they can with small open space zoning. But yeah, I think it's incentivizing people to do the right thing, whether that's density bonuses or other tools that encourage them to do the right thing. But also like no more of the wrong thing. Not allowing any mass development right on the edge of the creek, especially when we look at wastewater and other consequences. But I like what Devin said as well, is like a lot of really cool things that can be just done by people who live along that corridor. But it shouldn't just be on them. It's not one like, hey, you live on Flat Creek, you gotta pony up on this. It should be the entire community coming together to incentivize these solutions.
Thanks, Jim. Pete.
Thanks, Max. Yes, I do support this. Our zoning should be designed to, to meet a range of community goals, and improving water quality and riparian zones as well as appropriate public access is absolutely a community goal. So I'm supportive of this idea. Our zoning, as I said, it's supposed to meet a range of community goals. Some of those goals are housing. We have approved development near Flat Creek. And we did that to meet some of the other goals of housing, and maintaining 65% of our workforce in the community. So, there's a balance here. We can't take an ideological position on any of these things, but we should absolutely be looking at zoning as a way to meet these community goals. And I'm looking forward to reviewing the details of proposed zoning changes that would benefit the public and benefit landowners alike.
Thanks, Pete. Jessica?
For many reasons, I think it's important for us to adjust the zoning for the riparian habitat and make sure that we have appropriate setbacks, and essentially just meet the other zoning that we have. Like with Joe Rice's new building, we have regulations that prevented them from building too close to Flat Creek. And I mean, that's all for very good reason. And then, when we go further up Flat Creek and we have all of these private residences, I think about someone like myself. We own a house here. We have a gigantic mortgage on it. Even with density incentives, like density bonuses, we can't really do much. We just don't have the means or the wherewithal to do that. So, I mean, I think a lot of people would like to do the right thing and make sure that we are taking care of Flat Creek and doing what we can to protect the water quality there and all of the things that we do. And then we have issues too in the wintertime with ice. It's an extra cost for us to then go in and get rid of all the ice and the buildup in that creek. And so it's somewhat of a conundrum what we're trying to do here, I think it always comes back to funding and being able to understand the struggles that people are in. And if they do have housing, if they do own their homes or their residences that are along the creek, what are we asking them to do? I mean, it's like many things in our community, it's a conundrum, and it sort of comes back to this issue of funding and capacity and bandwidth in order to get these things done for the benefit of the community. And I know that some people, I don't understand where Michael comes from with the tax, because we really, at the end of the day, we really do need revenue, and things cost money. And if we want to do things and have high quality services, someone's got to pay for them, and they're for the public good. So it should be the public that's paying for them. And granted, having a sales tax is not the best way to go about generating revenue, because it's quite regressive and it affects the lower income families more than wealthier families. It's all we have. It's all we have until we change legislation to allow us to do other measures to generate revenue.
Thanks, Jessica. With that, we'll switch over to the mayoral candidates, and Michael, you'll get the first answer here.
Yes, thank you. Actually, Jessica, yeah, let me address this. Perfect. So instead of taxing and taxes, let's talk about incentivizing and fees. All right, we have turned our back on Flat Creek long enough. We have kept Cache Creek underground far too long, and we need to incentivize developers, builders, contractors, homeowners to bring that back up, to daylight those places and make it a goal in our community to show off these great gems that we have this water and protect it. And we need to do it by incentivizing, not by taxing. It's just, sorry, I'm just not into it. And you know, we can keep it going and make it what we want it to be. And we can do it by collaborating again with the experts. There's funding, I'm sure, out there. There's grants. You know, we got to think of other ways to raise or to have revenue generated instead of taxing our citizens. So thanks, Jessica. Just want to get that out. And thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Michael. Haley, you will have the last answer here, and you own a property on Flat Creek, so appropriate.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Max. Obviously, Flat Creek is near and dear to me in a number of ways. If you think about Flat Creek, where we start at Dairy Queen, and think about the drive-through, you feel like you're about to fall into it on the pavement. And you wind through town and say we go to Smith's as the end. There's a variety of ways that our buildings interact. My family's really proud to use it as an amenity and to we really feel like we're stewards of our small little section. And then you get down to kind of the more industrial area or commercial area, Wendy's, Ace, TJ Maxx. And those are the places that I think of that we need to provide incentives and LDRs for that. When they do redevelop, they redevelop with Flat Creek in mind. Right now, they don't, the pavement goes to the end. Their parking, it's hidden. Their parking is right up to the creek. And I think, Max, that's what you were highlighting with stormwater and snow storage. It basically gets dumped into the creek, and we know that's not a good thing. This is something that the council has been looking to and working towards. And we right now kind of think of it as the Flat Creek corridor and as an overlay. And again, I think that the way that we'll get the buy-in and the incentive or the buy-in from the property owners is to provide the incentives for them to do something and to really highlight it. I think it's also interesting to note that Flat Creek was moved from its original position, and it was moved closer to the butte, back behind Wendy's and Ace. I'm not sure of the year, but you just look at the way that communities develop and land development regulations come through, and knowing our history and being able to bring that forward and make it better now and for the future. So I'm really excited about Flat Creek. I think that we can make it a really another shining spot of Jackson. And I look forward to doing that as mayor. Thank you.
Well, thanks to all of you. As expected, we have taken up all of the time and have left no additional time, but thank you for the robust conversation about water. As you've all highlighted, it's such a critical issue to this community, and thank you for all of your thoughts and your willingness to come to this forum and share those today. This conversation, we hope, does not end here. We hope whomever among you is elected will carry this into office as a priority, and thank you for all of you for prioritizing it so far. I will mention we are switching over to County Commission, the same forum. If the town council candidates don't mind logging off, you're welcome to join us on the live stream on YouTube. Please stick around, but thanks to all of you for joining.
Thanks, Max.
Thanks for having us,
You guys.
Max.
Max, congratulations on the new role.
Thanks, Greg. You got that. This is the fastest transition in the history of forums. We are live on YouTube now, and we just dismissed the town council and mayoral candidates and immediately have you guys back in. So the power of technology is at play here. Thanks to all of you for joining us. I'm going to pull up my notes here and get us started to try to keep us on time. We remarkably mostly stayed on time with the mayoral and town council candidates and hope to do the same here. I will give you all the warning that we might bump up against some time limits. I'll try to warn you about time limits via the chat box independently. But with that, I'm just going to get us started. So thank you to all of you, switching gears mentally takes a little longer than technology, to all of the county commission candidates for joining us today. It's such an important topic, and water management are so critically important to our community for a variety of reasons: human health, recreation, economic development, ecosystem function, the list goes on. And on behalf of the Jackson Hole Clean Water Coalition, I would like to thank each of you for coming here today to talk about these important issues and for sharing your views about how our community should address these challenges and opportunities related to water moving forward. Because water affects so many different aspects of our lives, it can be very difficult to work on issues. Many agencies and organizations that work on water issues happen to focus on one particular aspect of water because it's so complicated. However, many of the issues that plague our community are complex. They do not have easily identifiable sources or solutions. And the Clean Water Coalition was formed in order to create a forum in which the various entities in our community who work on water can bring together their various expertises into a common space. The Clean Water Coalition works together to understand the water challenges we face and to collaboratively design and implement solutions to those problems. The partners include the Teton Conservation District, Protect Our Waters JH, Trout Unlimited, Snake River Fund, Teton County Weed and Pest, the Jackson Hole Land Trust, PAWS, Ducks Unlimited, Wyoming Nature Conservancy, and the Flat Creek Water Improvement District. Part of the Clean Water Coalition's mission is to better inform the community about important water issues, and this forum is part of that effort. We believe the community needs to hear how elected officials plan to address water issues. I want to thank the library again for their partnership in putting on this forum and creating the space for community dialogue on this issue. I also gave the plug that they are hosting so many of these forums. If you are a voter looking to get informed, please look at the library. They're an incredible resource for informing voters about candidates' views and issues in this election. Also want to thank the town of Jackson, the Teton County Public Health Board, and the Jackson Hole Conservation Alliance for giving support and input for this forum as well. Today's forum is going to last for an hour. Each of the candidates were given a white paper that was written by the Jackson Hole Clean Water Coalition partners, provides background information on a variety of water issues in the community. The Clean Water Coalition partners have formulated questions about those issues, and I'm going to pose those questions today. Each of the candidates will be given 2 minutes to respond to the question. Just for clarity, we sent these questions about 24 hours in advance, each of the candidates, so they've had a chance to see them and think through their responses. If time allows, we'll allow for some dialogue, and you may get some community questions that are posted on the live stream. We'll try to make space for those, but it sort of depends on the length of people's answers, and we want to prioritize having the candidates have a chance to answer each question uninterrupted for 2 minutes, whatever they need to say. So that'll be on the fly, and we'll make a decision depending on time available. With that said, we're going to get started, and we will jump in with introductions. I'd like to ask each of the candidates, if you don't mind, please introduce yourself and briefly let us know your vision for stewarding our community's water resources. This is the one question where you get 1 minute. All the other ones, you'll have 2 minutes. And Natalia, we'll start with you.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you. I'm Natalia Macker, Chair of the County Commission, and I also chair the Health, Safety, and Social Services Committee for the Wyoming County Commissioners Association and serve as a gubernatorial appointment to the Land Quality Advisory Board for the DEQ. As I look ahead to another term, the community's health remains my top priority. We must also keep growing opportunities for our working families through stable, safe housing, sustain our ecosystem, and invest in childcare. Underscoring all of my work is a focus on advancing equity, and this is particularly important when it comes to my perspective on water. As we consider our community's water resources, we know we'll be utilizing a combination of direct intervention, infrastructure improvement, study, regulation, planning, and monitoring. These complexities also demand a strong focus on collaboration and communication as we work across entities and jurisdictions. Lastly, as I look at where we've been and where I believe we want to go when it comes to our water resources, it's my goal that we shift to a proactive mindset rather than just reacting. Access to clean water is a human right. Water is deeply personal for all of us. It is the intersection of our health, our recreation, our economy, our place, and our future. And I look forward to today's conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Natalia. Peter, we'll go to you next.
Well, great. Well, thank you first to the Jackson Hole Clean Water Coalition for hosting us today. And thank you to everybody who's watching. My name is Peter Long. I'm running to be your next Teton County Commissioner. Very simply, addressing our water quality issues will be a defining challenge, not only over the next several years, but over the next many years. Everyone here in Teton County deserves safe drinking water. We shouldn't have to worry about E. coli or pollutants in our backyards, streams, and rivers. And most importantly, our entire ecosystem relies on the integrity of our waters, which is all to say that each of us who live in Teton County has a responsibility to help address both our immediate challenges and ensure that we leave this valley better than we found it for future generations. Now, correcting course in addressing these issues will require education and awareness, and I commend organizations like Clean Water Coalition and Protect Our Waters for the good work you're doing on that front. It's going to take remedies that address the immediate problems that we're seeing crop up, and it's going to take a long-term framework to guide our growth and ensure our healthy waters over the long term. Now, each of these pieces are going to require strong leadership and community-wide involvement. So I appreciate the Clean Water Coalition for hosting us today, and I look forward to a constructive conversation.
Thanks, Peter. We'll go to Wes next.
Thanks, Max. Sorry, I was muted. My name is Wes Gardner. I'm a local business owner. I own Teton Toys, and I serve on a couple of your local boards. One of those boards, START, I just had to escape from a meeting from. So, I'm here today to talk about water. And, water is often one of those resources that we overlook until there's something wrong. And unfortunately, in this community, there is something wrong. There are a number of things wrong with our water right now. There's sections of our community that can't safely consume their drinking water. There's sections of, there's streams and bodies of water in our community which are inundated with E. coli. There's our river habitats are struggling as climate change increases water temperatures to the point where aquatic life, our native cutthroat species, which is so valuable to us for so many reasons, are struggling. Unfortunately, we're in a position where we're forced to be reactive to a lot of these changes. In particular, the water quality issues in Hoback, we are at 10 parts per million nitrate, which is unsafe to drink. If I'm elected, I promise to get us to react to these situations, get us back to stable, and start to be proactive when it comes to protecting the water quality in Jackson Hole. For me, I'm interested in having the water that flows out of our county be as clean as the water that flows in.
Thanks, Wes. Christian. You're on mute there, Christian.
How's that? Thank you for putting this on, Max. And for everybody who's taking an interest in this topic, it's such a key one for all of us. The 2012 comp plan enshrines our community's priorities, as we know, in its opening words, to preserve and protect the area's ecosystem in order to ensure a healthy environment, community, and economy for current and future generations. So I'm a husband, I'm a father, conservationist. Got here in '93, and since then I've launched 3 media companies, 2 nonprofits, helped build the Boulder Park and reinterpret our community's conservation legacy with Shift. I'm running for county commission because I'm concerned that our willingness to meet the demands on this place is undermining the reason that they exist in the first place, our ecological integrity and the quality of life and experience it affords for residents and visitors alike. The ecosystem is our everything. It's our golden goose. And again, we're making concessions to its protection. While any single concession can seem on its own innocuous, in aggregate, our environmental integrity and the quality of life it affords is being degraded. So is our water. The demands on this place will never diminish. All our candidates for elected office will work hard to meet them. I'm running to protect the reason they exist in the first place.
Thanks, Christian. And Greg, you'll close us out on the introductions.
Thank you. And I want to thank everybody that's putting on this forum and just the importance of water quality to our economy and to our public health within Teton County. I have actually made this a pretty large point since I've been on the county commission to investigate and look at our water quality. We are currently working with a couple of other groups within the community on water quality. It's very important. Water quality is a right, not a privilege regarding public health. My business revolves around the importance of clean water in our fisheries. I own a fly fishing equipment company, so it's very important to me in that manner as well. My family has been here for over 50 years. My brother and his wife and little son just moved here. We have a couple of small children that are in my family. It's very important that we have clean water for them and all of their friends and neighbors and other citizens of the community. So again, this is hugely important and is going to shape Teton County now and well into the future. And we need to get ahead of this. And so the time is now.
Thanks, Greg. With that, I'm going to hop into the questions here. And again, candidates will have 2 minutes to respond to each question, and I'll call on you to respond. The first question is about nitrates, which some of you referred to in your introduction. Nitrate pollution in groundwater is a serious human health concern. Excessive nitrates are linked to infant methemoglobinemia. That was the hardest part on my end for the whole time pronouncing that. And also, which is also known as blue baby syndrome, and other very serious health conditions. Excessive nitrates can also signal wastewater contamination of groundwater and be a red flag about other more serious, though less frequently tested for contaminants. Regular testing of public water systems has documented a disturbing rise in nitrate levels in certain parts of the county. While these levels have not always surpassed EPA thresholds, they do raise concerns about the trajectory of our groundwater resources. The question to all of you is, how should Teton County respond to this trend? Should the county react when certain nitrate levels are exceeded in specific parts of the county, or should it defer to the EPA's thresholds? And Greg, you'll answer this one first.
Thank you. Regarding nitrates or any pollutants in our water, I would much rather see Teton County have a set of standards that far exceeds the EPA standards. I think our citizens of this community deserve better. We are one of the wealthiest counties in the entire country. I would hate to be in the headlines right there with Flint, Michigan. So I know we can do better. So looking forward, I think that there's a couple of good studies going on We need to bring those studies together. We need to understand where the redundancies are happening and start to put out a process in which we are going to get ahead of the nitrate issues within Teton County. Obviously, I think one of the larger places where nitrates are getting into our aquifer is through septic tanks, and the issue with high water getting into the people's leach fields. So I think looking down the pipeline a little bit, there's going to be a serious question asked of the citizens of Teton County, and that is, do we want to expand the sewage system to a much greater area of Teton County, whether that's down 390, out to Moose, maybe out to Kelly, maybe south of 22, down Fall Creek, and any of these places where potentially groundwater is getting into people's septic systems and leach fields. It's going to be highly important. Other ways that we can look at the way the county is and looking at things, and the way that I think our community needs to look at things, is how we take care of our lawns. Do we need to be putting fertilizers on our lawns all the time? And if we are, do you have proper drainage from your lawn into the nearest water body? And the county has quite a few regulations regarding that, but we can always do better. I think we need to talk to a lot of the lawn care businesses within Teton County and ask them what sort of fertilizers and lawn treatments they're using. So long ways to go, but we got a little bit of traction, but we've got to keep on pushing.
Thanks, Greg. Natalia, we'll turn to you next.
Thank you. I see the nitrate levels as an extremely urgent issue for our community. So we have work to do in immediate response, of course, with what's happening in Hoback, but in response to the part of the question of, should we just defer to EPA levels? Should we be looking at our own? I think that's exactly the question we should be asking ourselves right now. I'm not sure I want to advocate for the state taking primacy of water holistically, but I absolutely want to investigate opportunities for us to have a local framework to catch trends earlier. I think looking at trends is a really important word to use, so that we aren't just taking an individual data point that might be good or bad on an individual year, depending on your frame of reference, but we are looking at those trends and then zooming out, so that we aren't just seeing how this is impacting an individual parcel or an individual well, but what it is doing in the region, because the response to that is likely going to need to be regional. And so we need to think about it from that perspective. And if we can start thinking about it sooner, before we are in the emergency, I think we have the opportunity to address it in a more cost-effective manner, to bring in all the appropriate stakeholders and constituents that should be part of the conversation, and to mirror what should come forward. I also know in the realm of nitrates, it's my understanding that there's more research happening. And so I will be interested to watch how the EPA might respond to new research that comes out, and how we could participate in looking at, is the EPA threshold too high? Should it be lower? Should it be lower in different uses? And make sure that we are presenting our community and the people that live here with the best possible chance to maintain their health. Thank you.
Thanks, Natalia. Peter.
Great, well, thank you. And this is a urgent and growing problem that affects our entire community. Consider this: over the past 30 years, there have been 57 samples of nitrates that have exceeded 7 milligrams per liter. And nearly 3/4 of those have occurred in the past 5 years, which points to the fact that, again, this is urgent and it's an escalating problem. As I said earlier, everyone here in Teton County deserves to have safe drinking water. We shouldn't have to worry about pollutants and water quality issues in our backyard. And so we would be smart as a county to implement our own nitrate level standards and to develop guidelines to measure and control those. Certainly we can draw on national guidelines, best practices, but we'd be smart to set those even more stringent than the national guidelines for this reason. If federal authorities have to step in, like the EPA, that's going to be a costly and burdensome thing on our community, and it's going to have very real impacts for hardworking families, our businesses, really just community-wide. And I'm also a really big believer that local regulation and local government is a lot more effective than top-down intervention, simply because we can tailor those guidelines, we can tailor those rules to really meet our local needs and to really implement them in a way that is effective and doesn't hurt those who are working hardest. Finally, I do believe that we really have to put our full resources behind remedying the source of nitrate pollution. And for me, that means creating a dedicated source of funding, whether it's a mill pulled from the general budget or a line item, budget item. We have to commit to the infrastructure we need, which is replacing, programs to replace and monitor failing septic systems, long-term a county-operated wastewater treatment facility, and then also just practical things like last mile programs to help homes hook into a central sewer and wastewater treatment facilities. But very simply, this is an urgent problem. It's going to take community buy-in, and we have to act now.
Thanks, Peter. Wes?
Like so many other issues in our community, we're forced into a reactive stance when we don't monitor closely these issues as they grow in scale. So, for example, you don't go from 1 part per million nitrate to 10 parts per million nitrate overnight. So I agree with Natalia. Let's keep a close eye on these things. And I recently attended an educational event hosted by the Conservation Alliance, in which we learned that there's a group of concerned citizens and organizations who have a plan afoot to create a lower threshold for the county so that we can monitor these things more closely, and so there can be consequences tools within the county that we can use to make sure that we don't reach these critical thresholds, the EPA thresholds. I would recommend that consequences should exist at 5 parts per million for nitrates. Stepping back a second, what we really need is a comprehensive water plan for this community, for this county. There are a number of folks, I'm sure, paying attention right now who have been advocating for this. I support those efforts. I would support a mapping of the community's septic systems so that we can identify which are in appropriate zones or which are in inappropriate zones. Septic systems just don't work in with certain geological parameters. And unfortunately, those parameters exist for the majority of our county. That's a high water table, and that's semi-permeable rock membrane. So the leachate enters the aquifer before it's able to be absorbed by the plant life. We need to commit to more E. coli studies. We need to commit to maintaining our aquatic habitats. And finally, I've got a 6-month-old at home. I live in Game Creek. That's not far from down south in Hoback, and you better believe that I'm paying close attention to nitrate levels in my own water. So this is critically important.
Thanks, Wes. Christian, you want to close us out on this one?
Thanks, Max. I'll figure Zoom out at some point, I promise. It is a great question. I just wanted to thank you for helping to raise the visibility, and in particular, some of the other folks that have been so responsible for getting this on our radar screens. Dan Lehman and Dan Heilig, Brad Nielsen, John Culberson, Brooks Saucer, Carrie Radcliffe have all been critical to this. So is Mike Kosmerl and the team of the Jackson Hole News and Guide. And so we really are indebted to all of you for helping bring this to the fore of our conversations. And to me, there really is no single issue more concerning than the contamination of our drinking water. And as we well know, over the past 15 years, those drinking water quality impairments and failing septic systems have led to the nitrate contamination levels that we're looking at now. And those levels are what triggers intervention by the EPA. And so they step in because it can lead to blue baby syndrome, as you pointed out. It can also lead to gastrointestinal illness, cholera, hepatitis A, typhoid, increased heart rate, nausea, headaches, abdominal cramps. You know, and there's a chance, some studies indicate that it also could lead to cancer. So we shouldn't have to wait for EPA intervention to address this problem. Our county can and must be our first line of defense in ensuring clean drinking water for all our residents. So my priorities as county commissioner will be simple. Top of the list is protecting our water. I'll work on developing a comprehensive wastewater management plan and demanding an early warning procedure that guarantees clean drinking water for all of our residents. But more important, I've called for the establishment of a conservation department to help ensure that future developments include environmental oversights that address the root cause of this issue, which is lax oversight, and help make sure they do not occur again. So as county commissioner, I'll work to guarantee clean drinking water for all Teton County residents. Thanks,
Christian. With that, we'll stay on the same topic, but in a more specific location, which is Hoback Junction. As I think many people are aware, many of the wells in Hoback Junction area, though not all, have significant nitrate contamination levels that do exceed that 10 parts per million EPA standard. This represents a human health concern for local residents. A local stakeholder group recently made recommendations to form a special district to begin to address this issue, and the Teton County Board of County Commissioners allocated $5,000 to help fund what is expected to be a $45,000 effort to form that district. The question to you is, as one of the largest property owners in Hoback Junction and a potential member of the special district, what should Teton County's role be in the special district formation and governance processes moving forward in Hoback Junction? Christian, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Max. Yeah, this again is fundamentally concerning. And so, you know, looking over some of the data and the papers on all of this, Wyoming Water Development Commission did do the math on what it would take to replace the public water systems in the Hoback area. And the estimates indicated that the cost in 2005 would have been more than $9 million. By 2010, the report estimated that the cost would have gone up nearly 70% to more than $13 million. That problem's still not fixed. So Hoback is hoping to form a water district, get a state loan, build a new water supply system. This will cost millions of dollars. And not all of it's going to be free money. So consumers of that water, the residents of Hoback, will pay for it with higher water rates. But special districts are not the way to address the problem. They're why we have the problem in the first place. No one is in charge. So even if Hoback were successful in setting up a water district, it would simply shift the onus of addressing the water contamination problems to the landowners. Our nitrate contamination problems exist because of lax regulations at both the county and state level. Over the past 40 years, we've allowed thousands of septic systems to be placed throughout the county in areas that were unsuitable for their use. Only now are we beginning to awaken to the environmental and public health implications that's created by this lack of oversight. In order for us to address this community-wide problem, we're going to need our Board of County Commissioners to develop that comprehensive wastewater management plan and establish the conservation department that I've proposed. We need to act now while we still can and before the costs of intervention become exorbitant. As County Commissioner, doing so will be my #1 priority.
Thanks, Christian. Greg, you're up next.
Thank you. I have to disagree a little bit with Christian on his opinion regarding special districts, especially water districts. I live in Melody Ranch. We have a special water district. There's strong leadership behind that water district. We've received federal grants and I believe some state grants to help improve that water district. We have clean water. So I do think there's a great advantage to special districts. I think the real issue right now with Hoback and the special district issue is finding the strong leadership within that part of the community who wants to take the ball and run with it and get this special district created. And so the county initially contributed $5,000 to sort of help get that ball rolling, potentially get an attorney in there to start writing up some documents. But as we've gotten into it a little more, that leadership has waned a little bit, and that's a problem. So while originally I felt like the residents of Hoback needed some skin in the game and needed to create their own water district, I now feel like since that leadership is not strong, that the county may need to step in and help them form their water district. And once they do that, it opens the doors to a lot of money. And I will agree with Christian that these grants aren't going to cover everything. And potentially we do still need to look at, they may not need a small wastewater system down there. They may need to just tap into the municipal town water and sewer systems. So there's a lot to look at, but initially we need to get that special service district created, get the buy-in from the Hoback residents, and let's move forward, and they can start applying for some grants. And at the same time, some of these other groups in the community can start looking at nitrate levels as a whole and as a trend. And we can start working on this all together as a community and not just have Hoback be an outlier.
Thanks, Greg. Natalia?
Thank you. I do believe that we should be participating in it, of course, at a minimum as a property owner there, but do believe the county can bring and would like to see us bring our expertise and other assets procedurally that we might be able to bring to bear in the formation of a special district. We own employee housing there and have employees living there, so we absolutely have a role to play. I do think we need to be realistic when we look long-term at where we're headed with the possible solutions, that may be something that is greater than a special district on its own, but that there's also opportunity with infrastructure to serve more than just that special district. But now that we are starting to get our arms around this very large problem and all of its different avenues that it's been so far, I think we can help and that we do have a role to play. And I see it a little bit differently from other special districts that might exist elsewhere in the valley, or that might need to exist elsewhere in the valley, because there is such a pressing human health concern at the forefront. And I think it's a great opportunity for us as a county, for our community, and for a portion of our community to have a positive collaboration with the state and really bring to bear some win-win projects to move this forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Natalia. Peter.
Thank you. Well, on all of our water quality issue fronts, our local government has to be part of the solution. And that's not only in writing policy and moving priorities forward, but it's also in being a facilitator and, again, really raising awareness and helping bring every corner of our community to bear on these tough issues. I do support the special water district in Hoback simply because the more granular we can get on these issues, the more tailored our solutions are going to be, and the more effective they're going to be. Now, that said, I think we also need to ensure that that is integrated into the county's larger framework, so that we're not just creating more redundancy and creating more layers of bureaucracy, but we're actually getting at the heart of these problems. I think the county's greatest asset and its greatest tool is the purse strings. And we need to very simply invest and make sure that we've got the funding there to meet these solutions. In terms of Hoback, very simply to the question, absolutely, I think our county should be stepping up to help facilitate this water conservation district, simply because we have skin in the game there. The county's a property owner, we have county employees living there, but also too because the county can help facilitate bringing those stakeholders in Hoback to the table and really moving the ball forward on this. And then just finally, this has been touched on, but I'll reiterate it. We do need a comprehensive, long-term comprehensive water quality plan. It's not only going to address these immediate issues, but it's also going to create a larger long-term framework to get ahead of them in the long term.
Thanks, Peter. Wes, you'll get the final crack at this one.
Yeah, it strikes me we've got 144 water districts in Teton County, but we don't have one in Hoback where we've got the biggest problems. So absolutely, does the county need to play a role in getting that water district up and rolling? Whatever it takes. That's the place in the county where we have the most critical water quality issues. So absolutely, I would do whatever it takes as a county commissioner to get the folks down there to come together around this solution. When we have a district, we're able to bring funding to bear from the state governments. We're able to bring grants to bear. We're able to bring loans to bear, and that's what we need. As far as I'm concerned, there's only two ways to fix the problems in Hoback, because a lot of this is coming from inappropriately placed septic systems. So we either need a small scale high-tech sewage treatment plant down there, or we need to pump the sewage back up to the town facility. And I think there's plenty of opportunity to look into either one of those options. My instincts tell me that we have a river flowing through our valley. The river obviously obeys the laws of gravity. So the creation of a small scale high-tech septic or sewage treatment plant down there would be appropriate, and I would be willing to bring SPET funding to bear on that facility. And I would be interested in considering pulling Munger so that to put on that sewage treatment plant facility so that the sewage flows downhill instead of uphill to the town's facility, especially as we see the town facility start to reach capacity.
Thanks, Wes. I just want to acknowledge that we are getting some really good audience questions. If we have time, we'll be pressed for time, but if we do, we'll try to acknowledge those moving forward too. We're going to switch topics here and talk about free-flowing rivers and bank stabilization. And Teton County is home to dynamic free-flowing rivers and streams, a uniquely intact native fishery, including Snake River cutthroat trout and other native species, and the largest single designation of wild and scenic rivers in the United States. While free-flowing rivers provide many benefits to the community, private property and infrastructure development along waterways in Teton County can be threatened by water's erosive forces, particularly when development occurs within the active margins of rivers. Landowners often respond by permanently stabilizing banks, such as levee systems along the Snake River or adding riprap. Teton County's permanently stabilized banks have only increased over time, which is to say there's never been less stabilized bank. We've only increased. And this often results in a loss of stream and wetland function, declines in fisheries habitat, and degrading riparian health. Bank stabilization can also cause issues downstream and in the future. Teton County acts as a regulatory agency overseeing permitting of bank stabilization and other types of projects within the river corridor, works in cooperation with the Army Corps on levee maintenance, works in partnership with other land management agencies, and is on occasion itself a project manager for stream-related projects. The question to all of you is, how should Teton County leadership ensure that its approach to permitting and managing projects within our river corridors, including bank stabilization projects, balances the comp plan's values of ecosystem stewardship with landowner and infrastructure needs? Wes, we're going to start with you on this one.
Yeah, I think as in so many other issues in the county and local government, we need to take a balanced approach to this. On one hand, we've got landowners with assets whose land is in danger of falling into the river as the river moves around. So we have to respect that. On the other hand, if we overindulge the landowners to basically create walls in order to protect their land, we run the risk of changing the aquatic habitat so that it affects our aquatic life and our important species like our native cutthroat trout. So we need to find a balance, a nuanced balance in each equation. We've seen efforts be successful, and we've seen efforts fail. When you look into, and it's not just private landowners who have issues with this. We've had issues with this at the Snake River Bridge at the intersection of 390, where we've created riprap. We've used native rocks to create riprap that alters the flow of the river, but we've done so in ecologically friendly ways, so that our native cutthroat species are protected and have the habitat that they need to survive. And we've seen it also happen in the Gros Ventre River, where the highway crosses it north of town. So we've seen successes. We've also seen failures. The Snake River Sporting Club, that organization subverted all the rules and just did what they felt they needed to do to protect their land. Obviously, that's completely inappropriate. We have fantastic organizations in this community to help guide us in these conversations. And I would just rest again on balance and nuance for each situation.
Thanks, Wes. Christian, we'll turn to you next.
Thanks, Max. Well, I think I made pretty clear that by now what the reasons that I'm running for county commissioner. It's first and foremost to protect the ecosystem. And my concern is that our willingness to do that is being outstripped by our willingness to build more hotels or widen our highways or develop new roads to accommodate, this demand for all things Teton County that's simply never going to end. And this willingness to meet these demands is having such significant impacts on our ecosystem and our quality of life and on our clean drinking water. But, when I got going, I was like, am I the only person that's really worried about the direction that we're headed? So I put together a survey and put it out there, and more than nearly 600 people have responded. Results have been illuminating. So across party lines, regardless of how long people have lived here, protecting the ecosystem actually does remain our number one priority. And the only topic that ranked higher was clean drinking water, which clocked in at very important for 87% of respondents. Perhaps most interesting, across party lines, 84% of respondents are either willing or might be willing to accept limitations on new development in Teton County if they preserved and protected the ecosystem. So protecting our ecosystem, I think, we understand at a community level. It not only helps preserve our quality of life, our social cohesion, and our economy, it also serves as an example to the rest of the world of the ways we can maintain that delicate balance between the built and natural environments. It's our legacy as the crucible of conservation. We take that legacy very seriously. And I take the opening 6 words of the comp plan very seriously to protect and preserve our ecosystem. So if elected county commissioner, I'll work to ensure that protection of the ecosystem remains our number one priority in every decision that we make.
Thanks, Christian. Greg, we'll turn to you next.
Thank you. Teton County is in a very unique position when it comes to our levees. And this is federally. The Army Corps of Engineers actually pays for the maintenance, the operations and maintenance of our levees within the levee system. So when it comes to creating new levees, whether it's on private land or maintaining the current levees, we have to be careful, and there's some standards that we have to adhere to make sure that our levee system is still up to the standards in which the Army Corps of Engineers will continue to maintain it. So that's critical. Moving forward, I believe that when we're dealing with potential private landowners and they're trying to harden their levee system or the banks of the river, I think we maybe need to look at some of our standards and realize that there could be some better ways to do what they need to do to protect their land. Maybe looking at more organic types of materials for hardening. Look at, there's a myriad of different things, and I'm not an expert in this, but I know that there are plenty of firms out there that are experts. And an example that the county dealt with was over at the Gros Ventre Bridge. We actually had to harden an area. The initial proposal for hardening had some pushback. We looked at it more closely. We had conversations with the Elk Refuge and I believe Grand Teton National Park regarding how they would like to see it hardened, along with some public input. And I think we got to a better place as far as the materials that were used to harden that particular area of the Gros Ventre River. But I agree, with every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction somewhere in the system. And, we are just going to have to look at what we're doing regarding bank stabilization more holistically as we move forward. And that does require, especially when we're talking about the health of our fisheries, fish, aquatic biologists, fish biologists, hydrologists, and a myriad of other sort of ecological scientists to help us with making the right decisions.
Thanks, Greg. Natalia?
Thank you. At a base level, I'd like to make sure that our approach in this area moving forward continues to incorporate all the lessons that we learn from each project. I'm willing to consider a framework that better supports the type of holistic decision-making that we want to see, particularly when it comes to our wild and scenic rivers and our responsibility there. One of the lessons that I do think we've learned that Greg alluded to is that while the words on the page may only require a base level of standard practice or materials, we can really work together with partners to look for positive resource outcomes for the water when we have a project that needs to move forward, and that we can encompass the entire ecosystem when we think about that if we decide to do so. I also think that when we look at individual developments, we have to look at that both for that individual development and beyond it, and we are learning more and more how to do a good job of that. And I think that we can mesh all of the values, as Wes said, and hold ourselves to high standards. So another place where we've learned, and I think are incorporating those, are the importance of early coordination. So when we have a framework, we build on those collaborative processes with partners and stakeholders that have specific areas of expertise. And ultimately the net is that we are in a position to learn and adapt as we move forward. And that we take that network view while we look to innovate and incorporate new practices. Thank you.
Thanks, Natalia. Peter, you'll get the final word on this.
Great, thank you. Well, let me introduce everyone to Walter, who woke up a little early from his nap. So looks like he may be joining me for the remainder of our forum here. On bank stabilization, Wes said it well, that this is it's a delicate balance between ensuring the health of our rivers and looking out for not only private property interests, but also infrastructure and public interest. And so anyone who's been around the valley for a while obviously knows, our rivers are dynamic, their patterns change, they evolve, and their health is dependent on that evolution. And we've seen, and we're beginning to see more, the impacts of these of levees and putting in walls to really build in those current paths. And the effect that has is, it may protect upstream, but then the effects are more pronounced downstream. And even more, those areas where we are walling off and walling in waters are, we're affecting the health of wetlands and all these things that really, again, depend on those evolutions of our rivers. There are those common sense moderate steps you've heard him mentioned here of riprap, natural stabilization of riverbanks, which have much less impact on fish habitat, on the surrounding wetlands, things of those nature. So I think we ought to be looking at what we can do to toe the line between those two interests of kind of common sense practical answers that are going to help stop erosion where we can, while at the same time not just pushing those effects downriver further. All this, I think, does also put a point on the need for prudent planning when we consider housing, commercial space, infrastructure, all these things. So we absolutely need to protect those considerations. but let's do so in a way that's not irreparably damaging not only our rivers, but these other resources that depend on them.
Thanks, Peter. We're going to stay on a related topic, but looking at land management in riparian river corridors, and that's specific to the BLM parcels. The BLM parcels along the Snake River are in the process of being transferred to Teton County, various processes. Once Teton County has taken over ownership and management responsibilities of these parcels, the county will be required to balance the various established and desired uses of these parcels. Fairly simple question to all of you. How should the BLM parcels be managed under future Teton County ownership? How should the conservation and recreational goals of these specific parcels be balanced? Peter, if you don't mind starting us off again.
Absolutely, thank you. Well, one, I think it's great to see that these BLM parcels are being transferred back to the transferred to the county. And my hat's off to the commissioners for working hard to get this past the finish line. And there are a lot of big considerations. I think opportunities like this really require taking a step back and looking at the full picture of how do we plan to conserve and use these responsibly in tandem together, so that we're creating good for our community and being good stewards of that land. Why I say that this is a win for our county is, again, that I believe that governance close to home is most effective. And so seeing that land being transferred to the county is an opportunity for us to really step up to the plate to be stewards of it. I would love to see us use this, create a corridor plan, but really use this in a way that conserves the open space and ensuring that that land remains open for all kinds of public use. I'd love to see parks, some things that are going to create access to river and land usage so that our community really gets value out of it. And then at the same time that we're looking out for wildlife habitats, conserving that open space. So it's a balance, but I think we look at all of these pieces in tandem and really map out what our priorities are, and that we're looking long-term for how we're going to use that.
Thanks, Peter. Wes, take a next stab at answering this.
Yeah, I'll try to be quick because I am interested in these clients. First of all, a very exciting opportunity here. First and foremost, let's make sure as county commissioners that we pay attention to the habitat conservation element involved with these parcels, managing them so that they maintain critical vegetative and wildlife habitat, eagles, moose, elk, trout, countless other species. It also represents critical big game habitat for the winter time. I love the idea of this wouldn't be on the county lands, but new campsites, possible river campsites. Get real excited about that. As far as the human element, pathways, trails, parking, ag use, access, parks. And I just want to thank the coalition for putting together that white paper. Fantastic resource, and we'll move on.
Thanks, Wes. Christian.
Yeah, well, this is at once very exciting. There are also some cautionary notes out there for when that transfer of public lands occurs. We have to be very careful about how we manage this moving forward. But I do believe it's a logical and positive step that our community can take into our own conservation legacy. And I do want to acknowledge the amount of hard work and thought that's already gone into this on behalf of the county, the Land Trust, the Snake River Fund, Waltons, in particular the Lockharts. They deserve tremendous credit for their efforts to ensure that the transfers are executed successfully and that a management plan that balances conservation and recreation goals be put into place. It won't be a simple or easy task, but then again, neither have any of the significant steps in our community's conservation legacy. So balancing the conservation and rec goals of the parcels will take collaboration. In 2015, I was part of an effort that developed the principles for advancing outdoor recreation and conservation. There are a set of principles to help guide the protection of our public lands, waters, and wildlife. These principles were so effective, they were adopted in 2016 by Colorado Parks and Wildlife to help balance the sometimes competing interests of conservation and recreation. To support the principles, I led the development of the SHIFT Pledge, which is 6 points that are tied to the corresponding 6 principles that all outdoor recreationists can take to ensure responsible use of our public lands. Over the course of the past 9 months, I've developed the Teton Climbers Coalition around principles of inclusivity and stewardship. I've also been developing a coalition of human-powered outdoor recreation groups in our area to help promote responsible recreation and influence public land management decisions so that they center stewardship as a central tenet. So striking that right balance between conservation and recreation will require a leader who understands that management must always prioritize the interests of the public lands themselves over those of any special interest groups. No other candidate for public office has the track record that I do for striking that balance. As County Commissioner, I'll work to develop a comprehensive river management plan for the Snake and Grove rivers to ensure that we adopt a more holistic approach to our rivers. Also strive to ensure that all our decisions honor our conservation legacy and live up to Aldo Leopold's 1949 definition of conservation, which is a balanced relationship between people and land.
Thanks, Christian. Greg.
Thank you. So this initiative has been pretty tricky, just getting it moving. 2008, well, before that, there was a record of decision based on the what was going on in the Snake River corridor. 2008, there's a management plan that came out, and a lot of what was in that management plan talks about passive or active conservation on particular parcels. Fast forward to now, it's well over 11, 12 years, and we renewed the efforts and the coalition and the management plan. So here we are. We have a consultant helping us move this through. But I think the key to all of this at the end is going to be, how do we handle the active and passive conservation and the pressures from within the public or certain interest groups on how these parcels should be used. There's a few that are landlocked. We need to give careful consideration to those. And currently right now, the private landowners have been generous enough to allow the public within the river to use their private parcels along with the BLM parcel. So it gives us continuity of river use. So I ultimately, at the end of the day, would like to see that the ability for people or the rights that people have on the BLM land now and the uses will be considered and equal to what the uses will be in the future, but carefully looking at passive and active conservation and management for each parcel. And finally, it's going to take the community to back this plan. It's got to go to federal legislation, and to get that passed, we're going to need, most of the community, if not all the community, on board.
Thanks, Greg. Natalia, you'll get the last answer here.
Thank you. I think when we move forward with this, what we will all have to accept is that we are not going to be able to please every person or every interest group. But I do believe that we can find the right balance. I'm really thinking a lot right now about what this looks like after the transfer and how we, Teton County as an entity and organization, decide to establish what our ongoing management and maintenance should look like and what that expertise should look like. And whether or not we need to stand up a new organization that brings in community organizations and nonprofits that have expertise, just how we want to do that. I don't have a specific outcome for that in mind, but I would like to see us think about that, because I believe that might help us get through some of the next phases where there may be unanswered questions. We'll try to answer as many as we can, but where there may be unanswered questions, where we want to make sure that the public will continue to be able to give input, and that the public is eventually going to be paying for that management and maintenance of those resources, and how we want that to look, since this is a big undertaking. Thank you.
Thanks, Natalia. I'll just note we're running a little over time. I hope everyone's okay with one final question, which I think is an important one. Peter, your son will ultimately get to decide whether you get to answer this one or not, I imagine. But it is about wastewater, and I think it's a very important topic, so hopefully everyone has time to stay on for this. The town of Jackson currently operates the largest wastewater treatment facility in Teton County. The facility not only serves town residents, but also many developments within Teton County. The facility plays a critical role in reducing wastewater loads into our aquifer. As residential development proceeds in both county and county, questions have been asked about the capacity of that facility and what the proper roles for the town and county should be in addressing the loads on the wastewater facility. Here's the question for you guys, is what should Teton County be responsible for, and what role should the county play in sanitary waste conveyance and treatment? If you think the town should assume responsibility for servicing areas in the county, what role should the county play in maintenance and upgrades to the town facility? Natalia, we'll start with you on this one.
Thank you. I think you addressed some of the issues in the question, actually, but I do think that the county should be willing, and I'm certainly willing, to engage in conversations about expectations for current wastewater management and conveyance with the facility we have. As the county, I think we have to take that long view and consider what those future needs are beyond that facility, or what type of growth that facility can manage. So I would like to hope or request that the county be part of those conversations with the town. I think we have more questions than answers on this topic at this point. Questions like who should be the priority in terms of who gets connections? Is the impact of the facility on the river acceptable or not? And what do we want to do about that? What do we want to do to incentivize hookups? And again, how do we prioritize that? How does that fit into planning for new development? I think we'll learn some things as we go through the neighborhood plan for Northern South Park that might help us understand that. But I think the county needs to recognize that we are part of that. It's a tool that we utilize, and we have things to learn, and we should be there to be a partner with the town. It is technically located in the county. So I would like to see it be a productive, collaborative relationship moving forward. We have to respect our jurisdictions, but we can look beyond how we've always done it to plan productively for our future. Thank you.
Thanks, Natalia. Peter?
Thank you. Well, let me say thank you once again to the Jackson Hole Clean Water Coalition for hosting us today. On this question, I think as a county and a town, really our community benefits by having clear lanes of jurisdiction. And certainly we've got benefited, the county has benefited by being able to tie into the town's wastewater systems. But as we come up on capacity with those, especially as our community continues to grow, I think it is important that the county lean into opportunities to create its own wastewater treatment facilities. And particularly, the county's best tool or lever is the purse strings here. And so I do think that we need to have dedicated funding to address the water quality issues that we're seeing now. In the longer term, I support a SPET initiative to create a wastewater facility that would be able to service all corners of our county and create, again, greater capacity to manage wastewater and waste. And finally, I think, we talk about roles of town and county. I just go back to this one point that I think our county leadership really has a responsibility, not only in driving policy, but really bringing all stakeholders from within our community, from every corner of our community, to the table to tackle these really weighty issues. Again, we all rely on safe water from our taps. We all want our rivers and streams, to know our rivers and streams aren't polluted or contaminated. And so very simply, we all have an interest in addressing these issues head on. And the best solutions are going to be when we all come to the table, when we have a spirited debate, even when we disagree, when we have competing ideas of where we need to go, making sure that everyone has a voice and that everyone's contributing to solutions will really make sure that we get to the right outcomes.
Thanks, Peter. Wes?
Yeah, I think this is about the most important question that you can ask. And I do believe the county has a role to play in wastewater treatment. What's clear is that we have 3,600 septic systems located throughout this county, and many of them are located in inappropriate places. I've already talked about the combination of what happens when there's a high water table, and there's a semi-permeable rock membrane, and the leachate isn't able to be absorbed by the plant life before it seeps into the aquifer. We have a sole source aquifer. That means once we screw it up, it's going to be really, really hard to get it clean again. So what exact role does the county have to play? I agree that I would have put it on this SPED initiative, and I would have put a wastewater treatment facility, sewage treatment facility on the West Bank, and a second one down at a smaller scale one down at Hoback. Maybe we can wait the 7 or 8 years but before we deploy the West Bank treatment plant and wait for the next SPED initiative. But currently the situation is we've got a 40-year facility out at Teton Village. We've got a facility a couple of less years old in the Aspens. Those systems are being well managed, well maintained. There's no problem with them so far. But let me tell you about what happens if there is a problem. Those systems pump treated sewage directly into the aquifer. So instead of it going into the river, where if there's a problem, at least it gets diluted into the river, it goes directly into the aquifer. That is a recipe for disaster. And we only have the capacity to store sewage for a couple hours at either one of those facilities. So that's not a solution to me. I am a proponent of using county funds, using the SPED initiative. And I think the county can also reduce our reliance on the town systems, which are currently operating, maxing out at about 3.5 million gallons a day. With a capacity of 5 million. So we could take some of that Wilson capacity off of the town needs.
Thanks, Wes. Christian?
Thanks, Max. Yeah, it's a great question. It's also a hard question. The county's most powerful tool is planning and zoning, and we do need to ensure any new development connects to a 100% viable waste treatment plan. But one of the reasons I demanded a neighborhood plan before any upzone of Northern South Park was that the applicant had provided no clear indication of how they would handle their wastewater. The town of Jackson has requested and still hasn't received information from the landowners that would allow the town to determine whether the development can connect to the town's wastewater treatment facility. So how we manage the wastewater in Northern South Park or any other development is a critical issue that needs to be resolved before any zoning changes are made. And a neighborhood plan must clearly indicate how wastewater will be handled without contaminating our aquifer or our groundwater. Those advocating for the upzone before wastewater management was in place were kicking the can down the road, and that was imperiling our community's public and ecological health while passing along the bill for EPA intervention to Teton County residents at a later date. It's a bill we can't afford. So in addition to calling for the establishment of a conservation department and supporting the comprehensive wastewater management plan, demanding an early warning procedure, as county commissioner, I'll advocate for removing or decommissioning septic systems in sensitive or unsuitable areas and replacing them with or connecting them to a centralized sewer system. Developing source water assessments and source water protection plans for every one of the 114 public water systems that's now serving the county. Prohibiting new septic systems in nitrate hotspots, which we've got 5 or 6 around the county already. Revising our small wastewater facility regulations to include the most protective measures recommended by the EPA. You know, for me, it's pretty simple. Our mantra canon should be no new Hobacks. We can't afford it. So no new Hobacks will be my priority as Teton County Commissioner.
Thanks, Christian. Greg, you're going to get the last word on this.
Oh boy, thank you. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this, I completely think that we're going to have to expand the wastewater treatment and water system throughout Teton County. Currently, the town of Jackson is actually doing a capacity study on the wastewater treatment plant south of town. That should glean quite a bit of information as to what the current system can handle, and as our community continues to grow, what we're going to need. There's been a lot of good points mentioned by the other candidates, regarding the two other larger wastewater systems at Teton Village and the Aspens. They are functioning and work well currently. There's a lot of residents and commercial businesses on those systems, and so potentially reworking those systems so they're not injection systems into some other system that won't affect our groundwater, or our drinking water, will be important. Getting to the last quarter or eighth of a mile so people can tap in, and it's not going to be cost prohibitive for them to get onto the sewer system is going to be incredibly important. There's a lot of work to be done, and it may take multiple systems. There may need to be a system on the West Bank somewhere. There may need to be another system that's even further south than the current system. That's going to require the comprehensive water quality study and plan. And overall, once we have that plan, I think that we need to move forward expeditiously. And I wouldn't be afraid to try to put something on a SPET ballot in the next couple of years, because we do need to get this moving. But once we know more from the town study on the municipal water system, that is going to be one of the steps forward.
Thanks, Greg. And thanks to all of you. We've run over time. Thanks to everyone for taking that time. A couple of you had messaged, that this conversation does need to continue. And so I'd encourage, without your even offering this up, but anyone in the public, please reach out to the candidates if you have further questions about these topics. I'm sure they're all happy to talk with you. They all have websites and should be able to answer these questions. Thanks to all the candidates for being willing to come forward and talk about such important issues. As much as anything, this is a forum for thought and dialogue and advancing ideas in the community. These issues are so important. We hope you will carry some of this knowledge into office, whoever's elected, and continue to push forward on water issues for the health of our community. Thanks again to the Teton County Library for putting this on. As the representative of the Jackson Hole Clean Water Coalition here, we thank all of the community for turning out such an important topic. We're going to try to post these recordings online so that people who were not able to watch them live are able to watch them in the future. And we'll try to get information out about where people can link to this directly. That will end it. The library is hosting tonight two forums, one on House District 22 and the other on the school board. So if you need more information on voting, please tune back in to the library tonight. And thanks everyone for taking the time.